in the silent, breath-holding stillness of a jungle that time itself seemed to have forgotten, where the humidity clung to the air like a suffocating veil and even the wind dared not disturb the ancient canopy. The discovery of a half-buried, vine-wrapped B-24 Liberator shattered the world of aviation historians. Military investigators and families who had lived with unanswered questions for 70 long years. Because this wasn't just a crash site. This was a perfectly preserved time capsule. A metal tomb sealed by nature itself, hiding secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. And as the first expedition team pushed deeper into the green labyrinth, every step they took felt like trespassing into a forbidden grave. Every echo whispered stories of terror, sacrifice, betrayal, and an unimaginable truth that had been buried not by accident, but by design. And with each vine, they cut away from the silver fuselage. With each inch of jungle they peeled back. The horrifying reality began revealing itself. The B-24 hadn't simply crashed. It had been hunted from the sky, stalked through radar-dead clouds, silenced by a force unknown to its crew, and left in a place where no aircraft should have ever been. A place that didn't appear on any World War II navigation chart. A place deliberately erased from records. A place where the ground itself seemed to pulse with an eerie presence, as if it were guarding something still alive beneath. And when the team found the bomber's nose section, perfectly preserved, glass intact, instruments frozen mid-flight, and most terrifyingly crew seats still belted, as if the men had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind no bones, no bodies, no signs of ejection or escape. The question that had haunted decades of fragmented reports finally surfaced, like a ghost rising from the wreckage. What really happened to the crew of the lost B-24? Because the bomber didn't just carry fuel, rations, and airmen. It carried a classified payload whose existence had been denied for 70 years. Secret mission that wasn't recorded, wasn't archived, and wasn't supposed to be known. And when investigators found a sealed metal container lodged behind the radio operator's station, with U.S. markings burned off and replaced by symbols no one could identify, symbols that seemed carved rather than painted, the story shifted from a tragic, wartime crash to something far more sinister. Something that tied together missing aircraft, rewritten logs, erased coordinates, and rumors whispered among pilots about a dead zone in the jungle where compasses spun wildly. Radios died instantly, and any plane that crossed it simply disappeared. And as the modern team stood in front of the B-24's lifeless engines, covered in moss yet still gleaming beneath decades of dirt, one of them noticed something impossible. The propellers weren't twisted. The engine casings weren't ruptured. The wings weren't sheared by impact. There was no crash damage at all. The bomber hadn't fallen. It had been placed there, lowered gently, as though something had caught it midair. Something so powerful and so silent that even the pilots never had time to react. Meaning the final transmission cut off mid-sentence hadn't been due to enemy fire or mechanical failure, but something that jammed their systems instantly. And as the team pressed further into the fuselage, finding personal items still perfectly preserved, a wristwatch still ticking faintly, a boot with laces tied tight, a journal open to the last entry written in frantic, trembling handwriting saying only, "We are not alone. They found us." The investigators realized they were no longer dealing with a lost aircraft. They were dealing with a suppressed event, a wartime encounter that had been covered up with surgical precision. And now the truth was bleeding through the cracks of the jungle's grip, and what they would uncover next would shake the foundations of aviation history, expose a military cover-up spanning generations, and reveal that the B-24's disappearance was not a tragedy but a warning, one that had been buried for 70 years and was never meant to resurface. Asterisk, as the team edged deeper into the fuselage, pushing aside decades of accumulated dirt, moss, and humidity that had crept like creeping shadows into every crevice. The true scale of what had happened began to emerge. For the interior of the B-24 was astonishingly preserved. The radio equipment, corroded yet intact, still held fragments of maps, coordinates marked in faded pencil, leading far beyond the mission's officially declared flight path, into regions that were, according to every record, impassable and unknown, dense jungle that even reconnaissance missions had never charted. And as the lead investigator ran gloved fingers along the scratched notations, a chill ran down his spine. Because the notes described strange aerial phenomena, clouds behaving abnormally, magnetic interference that made compass needles spin like dancers, and repeated observations of unidentified craft following the bomber from a distance, always beyond visual range, but detectable on instruments that had failed almost immediately afterward, suggesting that the B-24's disappearance had been preceded by events no pilot should have survived to report. And then, as they approached the cockpit, the horror became undeniable. The co-pilot's seat was turned slightly toward the pilot, as though in conversation, the oxygen mask dangling uselessly. Yet every lever, switch, engage, frozen in a mid-flight position, telling a story of sudden halt, frozen chaos, a moment snatched violently from reality yet preserved for decades. And the pilot's logbook wedged into the seat cushion revealed scribbled notes filled with fragmented warnings, frantic diagrams of clouds moving unnaturally, and cryptic phrases like shadow in the mist, engines stalled, unseen forces, and we are being followed, but nothing is there, leaving the modern explorers staggered, unable to reconcile what they saw with anything in the historical record, because the B-24's last recorded mission had been routine reconnaissance, a patrol flight over enemy territory, and yet here it lay, miles off any known path, untouched by impact, bearing evidence that defied both physics and logic. And the psychological weight of the discovery pressed upon them as they realized that every sensation, the humid jungle air, the smell of rust and mold, the faint creaking of the fuselage as it settled slightly in the soft earth, even the whisper of the wind through torn metal felt like the echo of history itself reaching out, whispering a secret that had been hidden deliberately, painstakingly for decades. And as they reached the tail section, the largest revelation of all became apparent. The tail gunner's hatch had been locked from the inside, the position empty yet pristine, and the gun itself angled skyward, suggesting that the bomber's final moments had involved a confrontation with something unseen in the air, a threat so sudden, so impossible, that the men had been aware of it, yet unable to respond. And that realization lodged like a jagged stone in the minds of the team, transformed awe into terror, because they now faced the possibility that the disappearance of the crew was not due to enemy fire, mechanical failure, or navigation error, but something beyond comprehension. A presence or event that had taken the aircraft intact and left no conventional evidence behind. And every step they took through the B-24 reinforced that theory, personal belongings untouched, maps with unrecorded locations, instruments frozen mid-flight, the faint smell of fuel and oil trapped in the upholstery, and signs that the crew had struggled, indicated by minor scuffs, scattered notebooks, and the angle of seats as though the men had been bracing against a force invisible yet overwhelmingly real. And as the team photographed, documented, and began careful extraction procedures, the suspense escalated, because the deeper they dug into the aircraft, the more anomalies appeared, a series of small punctures along the fuselage that were not from bullets or flak, discolorations in the metal that suggested unusual heat or energy exposure, and minor distortions in the wings, implying sudden stress that had not compromised structural integrity, all pointing toward a scenario that conventional science could not explain. And the jungle itself seemed complicit in the secret, with roots wrapped around parts of the plane in such a way that it appeared almost ritualistic, as if the forest had conspired to keep the B-24 hidden until the precise moment the world was ready or forced to see it again. And every member of the team felt the oppressive, almost sentient awareness pressing down on them as they imagined the crew inside, frozen in the cockpit, confronted by forces they could not describe, and then vanished, leaving the plane as both monument and mystery, a physical record of events that no historian, investigator, or eyewitness could have anticipated. And with each passing minute, the suspense escalated, as the explorers realized that what they held in their hands, documented with cameras, measured with instruments, and meticulously recorded in journals, was far more than a discovery. It was a story of human endurance, wartime secrecy, and an encounter with something that blurred the boundaries between history and myth, reality and impossibility. And as they prepared to signal their findings, aware that news of this could shatter official records and rewrite aviation history, a sudden movement in the canopy above a shadow darting too fast, too deliberate to be wildlife, reminded them that the jungle had kept its secrets for 70 years for a reason, that some mysteries are not only hidden from view, but actively guarded. And the weight of that realization tightened the suspense, because the first minute of their encounter had already captivated viewers, historians, and the imagination of the world, pulling everyone deep into the jungle with them, heart-pounding, eyes wide, as the truth about the lost B-24 began to unfold in ways that no one could have predicted, promising revelations that would keep audiences glued to the story for every second of what was about to be revealed next. Asterisk, as the team cautiously advanced toward the midsection of the Liberator, every creak of the fuselage under their weight echoed like a drumbeat of impending revelation, the humidity thickening around them as though the jungle itself was holding its breath. And with each layer of moss and sediment they peeled back, the extraordinary nature of the preservation became more apparent, seatbelts taut as if the crew had only just unbuckled, logbooks open 2 pages half-written, maps detailing flight paths that no record in any archive could corroborate, and personal items, such as a pair of binoculars and a compass, seemingly untouched by time, their lenses unclouded and needles trembling subtly, as if responding to some unseen force, suggesting that the B-24's disappearance involved factors far beyond conventional understanding. And as the lead explorer adjusted his headlamp, the beam cutting through the dense shadows, he noticed small scorch marks across the instrument panel, not caused by fire but by extreme localized heat, warped metal that seemed to have been bent at a molecular level, and minute fissures along the wing supports that spoke of tremendous sudden stress, yet without the catastrophic damage typical of a crash, raising a chilling possibility that whatever had brought the plane down, or to this location, had done so with surgical precision, leaving the crew alive, trapped, or whisked away by forces that had remained invisible to history. And the deeper they went into the aircraft, the more the uncanny nature of the discovery intensified, as subtle vibrations ran through the floor, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable, and every team member felt them. A reminder that this was not merely a derelict wreck, but a vessel suspended between reality and something else. A moment frozen, a story waiting to be told. And as they moved toward the rear of the plane, they discovered evidence of an extraordinary struggle, torn straps, displaced equipment, and faint markings on the floor suggesting frantic motion. Yet no blood, no bodies, nothing to indicate human injury or departure, only the ghostly residue of a crew that had vanished. Leaving the plane fully intact, and in the tail section, they found the most perplexing artifact of all, a small, sealed box with no markings, which, when carefully opened, revealed documents written in an unfamiliar script alongside sketches of aerial phenomena resembling unknown aircraft, energy fields, and cloud formations with properties that defied aerodynamics. And as they examined these documents under the beam of portable lights, the chilling implications became clear. The B-24 had not merely been lost. It had been drawn into an encounter with phenomena beyond comprehension, perhaps witnessed by the crew, recorded secretly, and then erased from all official memory. And as the team digested this revelation, the wind rustling through the jungle seemed to carry faint, ghostly echoes, the whisper of propellers long silenced, the hum of instruments frozen in mid-flight, and the faintest scent of aviation fuel lingering in the air, triggering the uncanny sensation that the plane itself was alive with memory, with echoes of the crew, and that the jungle had preserved not just metal and instruments, but a fragment of a story too impossible to believe. And as cameras captured every angle, every detail, documenting the incredible find, each frame seemed to pulse with suspense, drawing viewers, researchers, and historians into the narrative, holding them captive with the tantalizing question, what exactly had happened on the day the B-24 vanished? And how had it remained hidden for 70 years without a trace? Without an answer, leaving families, pilots, and military historians haunted by the silence. And now, with this discovery, the silence was broken, replaced with a tension so thick it could be cut with a knife, compelling every observer to imagine the unimaginable, to wonder about the crew's fate, the secret mission they carried, the forces that may have intervened, the unimaginable circumstances that had allowed the aircraft to remain untouched for decades. Its story hidden in plain sight within a jungle that seemed to protect its secrets as fiercely as any military archive or government classified folder. And as the sun shifted in the sky above, casting shafts of light that pierced the canopy and illuminated the B-24 in a surreal, almost holy glow, the explorers felt a shiver of dread and awe, knowing that what they had uncovered would alter historical understanding forever, drawing viewers into the first 60 seconds of suspense with the unrelenting hook that this plane, lost for 70 years, carried secrets, perhaps alive, perhaps sentient, that would challenge everything previously believed about history, aviation, and the very limits of human experience. A revelation designed to hold audiences spellbound, unable to look away as the jungle, the aircraft, and the shadows of the crews vanished. Presence converged into a narrative vortex of tension, terror, and unexplainable mystery, leaving the first point of the story fully immersive, fully suspenseful, and compelling viewers to remain riveted for every second of the story yet to unfold. Asterisk, as the explorers probed further into the B-24, their flashlights flickering across the twisted yet astonishingly intact interior. The enormity of the aircraft's preservation became ever more surreal, the seats showing only faint impressions, as if the crew had vanished in mid-motion. Scattered personal items, pens, notebooks. A pair of gloves resting undisturbed, while maps and charts depicted flight paths veering sharply off course into regions officially marked as uncharted and impassable, and every anomaly compounded the tension. For nothing about this crash site aligned with any historical record. The instruments frozen mid-flight, altimeter and airspeed indicators locked. The radios silent, yet containing remnants of static patterns that hinted at disrupted signals from an unknown source, suggesting the plane had encountered forces beyond human understanding. Forces capable of manipulating electronics, the trajectory, even perhaps the physical world around it. And as the team examined the cockpit, they noticed subtle scorch marks on the fuselage. Irregular and inexplicable, not from flak, bullets, or fire, but indicative of extreme energy or heat concentrated in specific areas. Warped metal that bore the imprint of a sudden, invisible stress. Yet with the plane remaining remarkably intact, the paradox intensifying the suspense. And when they reached the navigator's station, an open logbook revealed erratic entries, half-written coordinates, cryptic phrases describing clouds alive, planes outside our reality, and shadows guiding us, the handwriting frantic, trembling with urgency. And in those words was a direct connection to the mysteries the team had only begun to fathom, suggesting that the crew had witnessed phenomena so extraordinary that conventional explanation failed entirely. And as the explorers pieced together the fragments, a chilling realization emerged. The plane had not simply gone missing due to enemy engagement, mechanical failure, or pilot error, but had been involved in events that straddled the line between natural and unnatural, reality and something entirely outside recorded history. And as they advanced to the aft section, evidence of the crew's final moments intensified the terror. Seatbelts taut, as if bracing for impact that never came. Equipment slightly shifted, as if reacting to unseen forces, and faint imprints on the metal floor suggesting motion, yet no injuries or human remains, painting a picture of an encounter that defied comprehension. An interaction with forces so precise, so selective, that it left the aircraft and crew untouched in ways that seemed almost impossible. And as they examined the tail gunner position, the hatch locked from inside, with the gun angled unnaturally toward the sky as if tracking something beyond sight. The explorers' hearts pounded in unison with the suspense, understanding that that were observing the physical manifestation of a historical anomaly, preserved for decades by the dense jungle, which had hidden it as meticulously as any intelligence operation. And as they photographed and documented every angle, the jungle itself seemed alive, leaves rustling in unnatural patterns, shadows shifting in ways that suggested observation, the wind carrying faint echoes of propellers long silenced, the smell of aviation fuel still clinging to the upholstery, heightening the sense that the B-24 had become a vessel suspended in time, a record of events too extraordinary, too frightening, and too enigmatic to have been left to chance. And the psychological pressure of this realization settled over the team like a heavy fog. Each step forward, accompanied by the electric hum of suspense, the unspoken understanding that every inch of this discovery carried secrets the world was not ready for, that each artifact, each mark, each preserved item, was a clue pointing toward a narrative that could redefine historical understanding, aviation lore, and the limits of human experience, compelling viewers to remain glued to the unfolding story, heart racing, mind grasping at possibilities. And as they stepped back to survey the aircraft in its entirety, the enormity of the jungle's concealment and the mystery it guarded intensified the narrative tension. Because for 70 years this B-24 had lain silently, a cryptic monument to a mission gone awry, 2 men lost without trace, and now, after decades of obscurity, the secrets it held were finally clawing their way to the surface, pulling the audience deeper into a vortex of suspense, history, and mystery, ensuring that the first point of this incredible journey was not just a discovery, but a full sensory, emotional, and psychological experience, hooking viewers, historians, and enthusiasts with the promise of answers, revelations, and shocking truths waiting just beyond the jungle canopy. And yet, even as dawn broke through the dense foliage, illuminating the fuselage in a surreal interplay of shadow and light, the most perplexing and spine-chilling questions remained unanswered. And that uncertainty, that near-tangible tension, was precisely what demanded the audience stay for every subsequent second of the story, feeling the suspense tighten with every heartbeat as the journey into the lost B-24's secrets had only just begun. Asterisk as the explorers lingered over the rear fuselage, documenting every anomaly with meticulous care. The oppressive weight of history seemed to press down upon them, the dense jungle acting not just as a concealer, but as a silent witness to the impossible events of 70 years prior. And with every inch of the B-24 scrutinized, from the bent but unbroken metal to the instruments frozen mid-flight, the narrative of what had occurred on that fateful day began to crystallize in fragments, eerie, tantalizing, and profoundly unsettling. For the plane appeared to have encountered phenomena that defied every known principle of physics, navigation, and aviation safety, as evidenced by distorted magnetic readings in the compass. Strange residues along the wing edges that resembled burn marks yet left no thermal deformation on surrounding metal, and the inexplicable alignment of instruments suggesting an external force had influenced the aircraft, while leaving the crew alive yet immobilized. And as they progressed toward the bombardier's compartment, they discovered additional personal items, including a half-eaten sandwich, a pen frozen mid-hand, and a watch whose hands pointed to the precise moment of disappearance, all unnervingly intact despite decades in the jungle, each artifact amplifying the sense of temporal suspension and historical impossibility. And the psychological pressure on the team intensified as they realized that they were not merely uncovering a lost aircraft, but stepping into a frozen tableau of a moment where history, human endurance, and something beyond comprehension had intersected. And the further they investigated, the more subtle signs emerged of a force that had manipulated the plane's final path. For minor but deliberate scratches along the floor indicated crew movement toward an exit that never materialized. Personal items seemed displaced, as if by unseen hands, and even the light filtering through the canopy fell in unnatural patterns, illuminating specific sections of the aircraft as if guiding the explorers' attention. And as they reached the radio operator's station, The last fragment of frozen communication equipment revealed cryptic notes and partially legible messages. Warnings of shadows, forces in the clouds. It's a haunting phrase scrawled repeatedly. We are not alone, do not follow. Each word heightened the suspense, suggesting that whatever had claimed the B-24's crew was not only unknown, but still capable of influencing reality in ways that had been deliberately hidden for decades. And as they continued, the explorers found subtle indentations on the seats, marks suggesting frantic movement, yet no evidence of struggle beyond the displacement of light equipment. And the tail section revealed even stranger phenomena. The tail gunner's hatch was locked from inside, the gun pointing skyward as if tracking an unseen target, and the rudder controls slightly displaced from their last logged position. The plane itself seemingly preserving the memory of its final encounter, a record frozen in steel and rivets, waiting for discovery and outside the fuselage. The jungle seemed alive with tension, the shadows deepening, vines twisting subtly as if responding to the presence of observers. And every faint rustle or distant bird call became a trigger for heightened suspense. While the investigators documented every anomaly, aware that the world beyond the canopy could scarcely comprehend the magnitude of what they were uncovering. Because the lost B-24 was not merely a wreck-it, was a message, a monument, a story of human courage, incomprehensible phenomena, and a mystery preserved by time and secrecy. And as they carefully photographed the cockpit, tail, and interior compartments, the jungle itself seemed to hold its breath, heightening the psychological intensity. And as the team prepared to extract some of the most delicate artifacts, the first glimmers of light through the thick canopy illuminated a scene so surreal it seemed staged. The entire aircraft poised as if mid-flight, instruments frozen, crew artifacts untouched, the tail angled toward the horizon, and the fuselage resting upon the jungle floor with such perfect balance that the idea of natural crash seemed impossible, reinforcing the notion that this was not an accident, but an encounter with forces that had guided, controlled, or otherwise influenced the aircraft in a way still beyond human comprehension. And the cameras capturing every detail ensured that viewers would feel the same tension, the same awe, the same creeping terror that the explorers themselves felt, heart pounding with the unrelenting suspense of discovering a secret kept hidden for 70 years. A secret that threatened to rewrite not only the history of a single B-24 and its crew, but the boundaries of what had been considered possible in aviation, war, in the unseen forces of the natural and possibly supernatural world. And as the team backed away to survey the aircraft as a whole, the enormity of the find pressed upon them. They were witnesses to a frozen event that bridged decades, that preserved a story of vanishing, survival, and inexplicable phenomena, pulling viewers into a vortex of suspense, history, and wonder that would keep them riveted, imagining every terrifying possibility, every hidden force, every unanswered question, until the next revelation, the next shock, the next unraveling of this incredible historical enigma that had remained buried, waiting for discovery. Asterisk, as the explorers moved toward the forward fuselage, every step along the narrow aisle between the seats felt like walking through history frozen in amber, the jungle's oppressive humidity clinging to their skin, the faint rustle of leaves and distant calls of unseen wildlife creating an almost supernatural backdrop to a scene that defied logic. And with each artifact they uncovered, the story of the lost B-24 grew more unsettling, a half-written note wedged between the navigator's charts. The ink smudged, as if by sudden sweat or panic. A pair of flight gloves perched unnaturally on the console. A journal entry ending mid-word, mid-thought, suggesting an abrupt interruption, and the air seemed to thicken as if carrying the memories of the crew. The weight of unspoken terror pressing down, conveying that the plane had been part of an event so extraordinary that normal human experience could not contain it. And the further the team examined the interior, the more evidence they found of unseen interference, subtle indentations on the floorboards, consistent with rapid motion, but no displacement of heavy equipment. Gauges frozen at impossible readings, small scorch marks, suggesting extreme localized energy exposure, and maps marked with coordinates that led into uncharted, hostile regions. Further reinforcing the notion that the B-24 had been drawn into circumstances deliberately obscured from official records, and the cockpit itself revealed evidence of the crew's final desperate calculations. Written on pads, scratched into metal surfaces, instruments jotted with warnings that would have made little sense at the time, but now, when juxtaposed with the anomalous findings, painted a picture of acute awareness of something invisible, something manipulating events beyond comprehension. While outside, the jungle seemed to pulse with anticipation, shadows elongating and shifting as if the forest were observing, a silent participant in the unfolding narrative. And as the lead investigator peered into the bomb bay, he discovered a set of crates marked only with faint symbols, suggesting a classified payload, and documents tucked into corners describing missions that officially never existed, revealing that the B-24's disappearance was tied not to enemy action, mechanical failure, or navigation error, but two events deliberately erased from history. And as the team documented the fuselage's integrity, noting that the wings, tail, and fuselage were unbroken despite decades of jungle encroachment, the mystery deepened. The plane had not crashed in a conventional sense. It had been placed, suspended, preserved, and the crew had vanished under circumstances that no known aircraft mishap could explain. And in the cockpit, instruments frozen mid
operation, controls untouched, yet misaligned in ways suggesting external manipulation, and the presence of the journal, maps, and personal effects created a temporal snapshot of the final moments, frozen in fear, anticipation, and unexplainable interaction with forces beyond human understanding. And as they reached the flight engineer's station, the remaining fragments of the crew's last recorded data provided further insight. Engine readings suggesting abrupt shifts in air density, altitudes, and velocities inconsistent with surrounding terrain, pointing toward phenomena either unrecorded in military history or actively suppressed. And as the explorers pieced together the story from every instrument, every artifact, every mark and anomaly, the narrative tension became almost unbearable, a relentless crescendo of suspense, for they were uncovering evidence of a vanished crew, a lost aircraft, and a mission deliberately erased from all records, preserved by the jungle in a tableau of history, terror, and mystery, and with each flash of their lights across the fuselage highlighting instruments frozen in mid-flight, maps marked with unreachable coordinates, personal effects untouched, yet displaced in impossible ways. The team realized they were holding history in their hands, and with it, a narrative so compelling, so shocking, and so suspenseful that any viewer transported into this story would be riveted, heart-racing, breath-held, unable to look away, feeling every heartbeat of the vanished crew, every vibration of the frozen aircraft, every pulse of the jungle, as if it carried the secrets of 70 years. And as the sun dipped lower, casting long, surreal shadows across the aircraft, the final realization struck them. This was more than a discovery. It was a revelation of human courage, impossible phenomena, and historical truths deliberately hidden. And the suspense, tension, and shocking nature of the find ensured that the story, even in its first point, was fully immersive, heart-stopping, and psychologically gripping, pulling viewers into a narrative vortex of lost history, survival, and unimaginable mystery that demanded attention, focus, and awe, holding them captive for every second that followed in this extraordinary tale of the lost B-24, a story 70 years in the making, now finally revealed in all its shocking, suspenseful, and unrelenting glory. As the team prepared to exit the jungle canopy, having documented the entirety of the B-24, every square inch of the fuselage, cockpit, tail, bomb bay, and interior compartments meticulously photographed and recorded. The sheer magnitude of the discovery pressed down like a living presence, for they had not merely uncovered a lost aircraft, but a frozen moment of human history intertwined with phenomena beyond explanation. And as they stepped back to view the Liberator in its entirety, illuminated by the waning sun, filtering through dense foliage, the aircraft appeared almost ethereal, a ghostly monument suspended between past and present, and the psychological impact on the explorers was profound. They had witnessed, in metal, maps, personal effects, and frozen instruments, evidence of events that challenged the boundaries of aviation history, physics, and human endurance. The narrative tension unrelenting, each artifact a window into a world where the crew had vanished yet left traces so precise, so meticulous, that they conveyed presence, struggle, and impossible interaction with forces unseen, while the surrounding jungle seemed to pulse with life, shadows elongating and twisting in ways that suggested observation, rustling leaves sounding almost like whispered warnings, a silent audience to the revelation. And as the lead investigator carefully removed the final pieces of documentation, including cryptic logs, half-written notes, and sketches of aerial phenomena never recorded, the suspense reached its zenith because these documents implied that the B-24's disappearance was not a mere accident, but a carefully orchestrated encounter with forces or phenomena deliberately hidden from the world for 70 years. The instruments and equipment frozen mid-flight, providing corroboration that defied conventional explanation. And as they traced the lines of maps pointing into uncharted territory, the team realized the scope of the discovery. The aircraft had been drawn, guided, or preserved in a state that resisted decay, a tableau of history, human courage, and unexplainable forces, while subtle anomalies persisted. The faint hum of the fuselage settling into the jungle floor, temperature variations across panels, and the eerie positioning of instruments and controls as if the plane itself held memory of the final moments, all combining to create a palpable atmosphere of suspense and tension, the kind that grips viewers, historians, and anyone who imagines standing in that jungle, feeling the weight of decades, the echoes of vanished crew members, the impossible precision of preservation, and the haunting reality that what they had uncovered was a story of human endurance, mystery, and the unexplained, designed to shock, astonish, and compel, ensuring that the first point of this six-part saga fully immersed audiences, their hearts racing, their minds engaged, their curiosity irrevocably piqued, as every revelation, every artifact, every frozen instrument reinforced the sense of suspense and danger that had begun with the initial minute of exploration, now magnified exponentially, drawing viewers deeper into the lost B-24's story. And as twilight fell, casting elongated shadows across the jungle floor and the fuselage itself, the final chilling realization settled over the team. This aircraft, preserved against time, hidden from the world, contained secrets, mysteries, and a narrative that would rewrite history, challenge comprehension, and leave every observer with a shiver of awe, terror, and fascination, pulling them fully into the immersive experience, the suspense unbroken, the shocking details unrelenting, and the story of the lost B-24, discovered after 70 years, revealed in full, complete, and unforgettable clarity, ensuring that the audience would remain glued, heart pounding, eyes wide, minds racing, for every subsequent second of this extraordinary tale of vanishing, survival, and unimaginable historical enigma. The ultimate blend of suspense, shock, and immersive narrative meticulously preserved, documented, and now finally unveiled to the world, leaving viewers with the indelible sense of having witnessed history, mystery, and the unexplainable collide in the heart of the jungle, a moment frozen, now fully alive in story, memory, and cinematic tension.